This week on Jerusalem Dateline, violent strikes at the heart of Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Judea and Samaria. Some wonder, is this the start of a third intifada? Plus, Iran threatens Israel with annihilation, while the international community sits down with the Islamic Republic over its nuclear program. And returning to Israel, one of the lost tribes of Israel is on its way home. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Israel says the Palestinian Authority is behind a sharp increase in terror attacks, since their leaders are telling Palestinians Israel is trying to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Earlier this week, 2 Palestinians apparently took the message to heart and murdered 2 Israelis. Palestinians tweeted, "The knife intifada has begun." Knife-wielding Palestinians murdered 2 Israelis in separate terror attacks on Monday. A terrorist stabbed a 20-year-old soldier to death at a Tel Aviv bus stop in the afternoon. A few hours later, another terrorist stabbed a 26-year-old woman to death at the same bus stop where 3 Israeli teenagers were kidnapped and murdered by Hamas terrorists in June. They're the latest in a series of Palestinian terror attacks carried out using everyday items like cars and knives to murder Israelis. Israel blames the Palestinian Authority for inciting Palestinians to terror.
This incitement calls for the use of all means, as they call it, in order to make sure that Jerusalem, and especially the Temple Mount, is clean from Jews.
Yossi Cooperwasser from the Ministry of Strategic Affairs told journalists earlier that speeches like this one by PA President Mahmoud Abbas, known as Abu Mazen, is causing the trouble.
It is not enough for us to say that there are defenders. We must all become defenders of Al-Aqsa. It is not enough for us to say the settlers might come to Al-Aqsa Mosque. They did come, and they must not be allowed in the complex. We must prevent their entrance into the complex by any means possible.
Hamas, which is part of Abbas's Palestinian government, was more explicit.
Even he who owns nothing but his faith has a kitchen in his house in which he has a knife. He must grab his knife and confront the Zionist enemy. Another one owns no weapon but does own a car. He must push down on the gas pedal in order to take revenge of the settlers who corrupted the land and defiled the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I say there must be an uprising now.
This was, in my mind, understood by the people on the ground as a license to do things underground.
In response to the attacks, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said they would fight the incitement from the Palestinian Authority.
Those who protest against the state of Israel and in favor of the Palestinian state, I say to them, simply move there, to the Palestinian Authority or Gaza. I promise you that the state of Israel will not make it difficult for you. But for those who stay here, we will make it difficult if you are a rioter or a terrorist.
Palestinians claim Al-Aqsa is in danger because a growing number of Jewish Israelis want the right to pray on the Temple Mount. It's the site of 2 Jewish temples in Bible times, but Palestinians say the temple in Jewish history here never existed. The Israeli government says they'll defer to the Muslims and maintain the status quo. That means for now only Muslims can pray on the coveted plateau. In the meantime, Israelis are dealing with the possibility of terror attacks any place, any time. Much of the current violence surrounds the question, should Jews and other non-Muslims be allowed to pray on the Temple Mount? Palestinians, Jordanians, and many Muslims say a resounding no. Israel's High Court guarantees freedom of access to the Holy Plateau, including freedom of worship. But police prevent it out of fear of violating public order. Still more Israelis are demanding those freedoms, and that's leading Palestinians to take to the streets. Muslims call it Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary in Arabic. Al-Aqsa, which includes the mosque and the entire compound, is the 3rd holiest site in Islam. Muslims claim only they are allowed to pray there.
Muslims have to pray, but others, Christians and Jews, they can visit, just visit. Not to make pray inside.
For Jews, the Temple Mount is the most sacred place. 2 Jewish temples stood here during Bible times. Jesus visited, preached, and worshipped at the second temple, yet Muslims deny it ever existed.
Archaeology backs up the Bible, which says it's our holiest place, it's the center. from the beginning of the Jewish people, many think from the beginning of the world, it's the center.
For years, rabbis said it was forbidden for Jews to even set foot there, let alone pray on the Temple Mount, because it was too holy. Now more and more religious and non-religious Jews want their rights to this most holy place. Linda Olmert is part of Haliba, the initiative for Jewish freedom on the Temple Mount.
Because we want freedom for everybody to pray on the Temple Mount. Isaiah says it will be a place for all nations.
2 weeks ago, a Palestinian terrorist attempted to assassinate Yehuda Glick, Haliba's leader. Glick survived, and Israeli security later shot and killed the gunman. This incident, along with constant rioting in the Palestinian sector, highlight the growing tensions over the Temple Mount.
We as a government, we are against Jewish prayers on the Temple Mount, simply because of reasons that have to do with our commitment to the status quo that was agreed upon back in 1967.
Since the 1967 Six-Day War, Jordan has kept religious control over the Temple Mount. Israel maintains security, and only Muslims can pray there. Due to the current tension over the Mount, Jordan recalled its ambassador last week from Israel. Yossi Kuperwasser is Director General of the Strategic Affairs Ministry.
We believe that by committing ourselves to this status quo, we help keep the peace and security in Jerusalem.
But Olmert says it's all about civil rights.
The only place I know, certainly in Israel, where there is a real violation of civil rights as we have come to expect them in the Western world, in free democratic countries, is against Jews on the Temple Mount.
And she says there's plenty of room for everyone.
And I believe that when the Messiah comes, he'll solve all the problems. Should there be, until then, I believe that there's a place for all nations on the Temple Mount.
Joining us to talk more about the violence is CBN News' Julie Stahl. Julie, you've been doing a lot of reporting on this, and some people think we might be on the verge of a third intifada. You think we are?
Well, you know, Chris, there are officially no one's really calling it a third intifada. Not the government, not analysts. But many people are asking, well, what does it take to call it a third intifada? We have daily rioting, basically, in limited Arab neighborhoods. There's a lot of rock throwing Molotov cocktails at cars and buses in certain areas. So it seems like it's just cells. But I think we're trying to not call it a third intifada.
Well, some people are calling it a car intifada, a knife intifada. That's certainly what the Palestinian Authority and Hamas are calling for. So I guess we'll see. What is the word intifada? What does it mean?
It actually means uprising. So, you know, it's meant to not sound like military. It's meant to sound like a popular uprising. Though we've heard reports that, you know, a lot of the people are being paid. It's a lot of youth that, you know, that Israel arrests them and lets them out within 24 hours because they're underage. Some are like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, so they don't keep them. And then they're heralded as heroes when they get back home. So it's it's not really a winning situation for Israel.
The other issue about praying on the Temple Mount, you've been talking to some people about this desire by many Jews and religious and non-religious to pray on the Temple Mount. What are you hearing?
Well, like you said, it's a growing movement, and really for the first time we're seeing the secular Israelis or non-religious Israelis joining together with the Israelis to say, hey, we want our rights. We want to be able to go up there. This is our place. Legally, they're allowed to, but as far as the police are concerned, they don't want them up there because it causes trouble. You know, I just was speaking with an analyst who was saying that in 1967, when Israel reunited Jerusalem and they got the Temple Mount back and the Western Wall, they hadn't even had the Western Wall for so long that they were so excited about having the Western Wall back, they didn't really realize what it meant to have the Temple Mount back. And so they kind of gave the municipal rights to the Temple Mount back to Jordan. Yeah, and that's changing right now.
Yeah. Quickly, Julie, do you think this is going to increase, the story is going to be more intense as time goes on?
I definitely do. You know, Chris, we're talking about the place where not just the two temples were, but depending on your theology, it's where the Antichrist is supposed to sit. So it's definitely going to keep going.
Yeah. Well, thanks for keeping us up to date.
Sure.
Thanks, Julie. Coming up, the international community is sitting down with Iran over its nuclear program. that Iran's supreme leader is tweeting they want to annihilate the Jewish state. We'll have analysis from our CBN News studio in Virginia Beach. Israel is not only concerned about the possibility of a third intifada, but also about the threat of Iran's nuclear program. With conflicting reports over whether the international community will actually reach a deal before the November 24 deadline, social media became the sparring ground for preventing Iran from becoming a nuclear nation. Here's our report, followed by analysis from CBN News senior editor John Waukee in our Virginia Beach studio. In a message on his Facebook page, Prime Minister Netanyahu said his office sent a letter to the P5+1 nations, pointing out that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, publicly called for the destruction of Israel, even while he's negotiating a nuclear deal.
The leader of this country that is depicted by some as moderate, the Islamic State of Iran, has said in the last 48 hours, one, that he calls for the annihilation of Israel.
On his Twitter page, Khamenei called Israel a barbaric, wolf-like, and infanticidal regime, for which there is no cure but to be annihilated, and provided a 9-step plan for confronting Israel, including arming Palestinians in the West Bank. Reports say Iran is preparing to expand its plutonium program and may have 5 times the advanced centrifuges as previously thought. That would shorten the time it would take for Iran to become a nuclear power.
There is no moderation in Iran. It is unrepentant, unreformed. It calls for Israel's eradication. It promotes international terrorism. And as the IAEA report just said, it continues to deceive the international community about its nuclear weapons program.
Some fear with U.S. midterm elections behind him, President Obama could push through a deal with Iran. Netanyahu believes that would be a disaster.
This terrorist regime in Iran must not be allowed to become a nuclear threshold power. And I call on the P5+1 countries, don't rush into a deal that would let Iran rush to the bomb.
Netanyahu has warned against a nuclear Iran for years. It's not clear if the P5+1 will heed his warning or if it will fall on deaf ears.
CBN News senior editor John Waukee joins us now for analysis of the growing danger from Iran. So, John, why is the Obama administration so eager to reach an agreement with Iran?
Well, Ephraim, I think if you strip away the verbal commitments to Israel's security, which we've heard from the administration over and over again, the very idea that these mullahs in Iran multiple times and over multiple years have threatened the eradication of Israel, as we just saw, it's just astounding. But it appears that the administration not only wants an agreement with Iran, but believes that Israel is more of a threat to the international balance in the Middle East than the Iranian government in Iran has been. And they want this agreement, in my view, not so much to applaud Iran and to get an agreement, but to stop Israel from taking any action that would be military in nature. And that's a pretty scary proposition.
Now, that said, recently in Atlantic magazine, a senior White House official bragged that the administration had stopped Netanyahu from attacking Iran in the last 3 years. Why is that a good thing?
It's not a good thing. And that's the thing that's so disturbing, is that there are administration officials that actually believe that stopping Netanyahu was the most important thing they could accomplish. And in reading the Atlantic article, they were almost gleeful about this thing. And that is disturbing to a lot of people in both parties in the United States. And if you look at the central tenets of the Obama foreign policy, they've been after 2 things: stopping Netanyahu from pursuing military action against Iran and stopping Israel from building apartments in Jerusalem. Those are the 2 things which they latch onto with firmer intensity than anything else. And it's something that is going to lead to more damage for our country and more damage for the countries in that region as we go along.
Can Israel take military action now to stop Iran from going nuclear?
Boy, that is a good question. I don't fully know the answer to that. I know that Israel has repeatedly said, Netanyahu has said as prime minister and before he's prime minister, he has said over and over again that Israel will not allow Iran to go nuclear. You have to take him at his word. How they accomplish that without the bunker-busting bombs they need when Iran has hidden all these weapons deep underground, under mountains, it's not going to be an easy proposition, and it is going to be disruptive for the world. But the longer that waits, the more difficulty the world is going to face later on.
All right, John Waukee, as always, thanks for your insight. Certainly we'll continue to watch this for you.
Thanks, Evan.
Coming up, our powerful interview with Canon Andrew White, the vicar of Baghdad, about the plight of Christians in the Middle East.
Many Christians continue to suffer after being expelled from their homes by ISIS. Here's another excerpt from our interview with Canon Andrew White, known as the Vicar of Baghdad, and what he says about the plight of Christians in the Middle East.
We need your prayer for our protection. We need prayer for our provision. We need prayer for our perseverance so we keep going. And finally, we need prayer for peace.
What would be your message to people in the West and to the church in the West about the times that we live in, and how should they be preparing for the days that we live in and the days to come?
We really know that the Lord promises us in the last days, before he returns here to Jerusalem, things aren't going to be all wonderful, wacky and brilliant. They're going to be really hard. We're going to be broken. We're going to go through slaughter and massacre. And yet he says, still follow me. We invite you to come with us and walk this road together. We can't do it alone.
And is this a time for them not only to partner with you and people here in this part of the world, but also to draw closer to the Lord during this time?
Oh, absolutely. The two go hand in hand. You don't do one without the other. You partner with the Lord and you partner with his people. We are family. We have nothing to give. As Iraqis and Syrians, but we've got one thing, we've got lots of love. And we share with you our love for Yeshua, our love for each other, and our love for all of you who are viewing this now.
In what way have the Jewish people started to stand with you during this time?
Well, first let's start with our Jews in Iraq. We have 6 left, 6 Yehudi. And they have no rabbi, so I look after them. Friday night I make kiddush with them. I do the Torah reading for the week, explain it to them. But internationally, when we started suffering like this, the first people to stand with us were not the Christians, it was the Jews. What we're going through does not compare with the Shoah or the Holocaust, but it's very similar. All of our religious community is at risk. All of it is threatened with death. And the Jews were there with us. Our friends were the Jews first.
You mentioned the end times. Do you see what's happening with ISIS and things here in the Middle East as evidence that we are living in the last days?
It's an incredible sign, because we're told that things will be really bad, and they are really bad. We're being slaughtered and massacred, removed from all security. We're being removed from everything but Jesus. Mm-hmm. The Lord is here, and his Spirit is with us. That is what we keep saying all the time. The Lord is here.
Coming up, the return of the lost tribe of Bnei Menashe. Prophecy unfolding in our time. Finally this week, about 50 more Bnei Menashe arrived from India to come live in Israel. Here's a report we did when other members of their tribe arrived last year. As the story shows, the return of the Bnei Menashe is a homecoming more than 2,000 years in the making. Their arrival was tearful and emotional.
I feel like I'm home.
I feel so excited, I feel so overwhelmed, I'm extremely unexplainable, you know, like deep in my heart, I feel like crying.
And this group is just the first of a long-awaited migration. Nearly 2,000 tribe members live in Israel, but 5 years ago the government stopped their return. Now a recent decision permits all the Bnei Menashe, about 7,000, to return.
The 10 tribes may have been lost to us for many centuries, but they were never lost in terms of their identity.
Michael Freund of Shavei Israel worked for years to help bring about this moment. He believes the Bnei Menashe return fulfills biblical prophecy.
The prophet Isaiah says, Al tira ki idcha ani, fear not, for I am with you, God says. Mimizrach avi zarecha, from the east I will bring your descendants, your descendants. These are the descendants of Israel. It is as if the headline of today was written by Isaiah the prophet 2,500 or 2,600 years ago.
The Assyrian Empire exiled the tribe of Menashe almost 3,000 years ago. Although they settled in northeast India, tribe members kept their Jewish roots for more than 2,000 years. Several Christian organizations helped bring them home.
And in fact, the Hebrew prophet said when God gathered his Jewish people back from all the ends of the earth in the last days, that there would be Gentiles helping and bringing them back. God said, I'll beckon to the Gentiles. And so we have this invitation from God himself to be involved in this aliyah.
It's remarkable to see these Bnei Menashe come home and watch prophecy unfold before your very eyes. Well, that's it for this edition. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.